In Jean-Luc Godard's transformative 1960 film, Breathless, there is a scene where the protagonist Michel goes to a travel agent in order to collect some money that he's owed. There are a number of references in this scene that connote historical events that marked a replacement of French colonialism in the Arab world with American imperialist hegemony. These historical events had taken place fairly recently when the film was made, and in the film, there is a wider commentary around American cultural power occupying the mental landscape of the post-war Frenchman. Monsieur Tolmachov, who Michel is there to meet, describes himself as rusting, and Michel replies that it is better to be rusted than busted, which parallels the sentiment of a declining empire clinging on to power. Before the more contemporary narrative surrounding the geopolitics of the mid-20th century Arab world takes place, connotation is used to historicise France's empire and to comment on France's national character more generally. We can see a clock displaying the time 1623 and the date 21st of August. Both are thematic signifiers towards the coded narrative of this scene. An event that marks defeat for French imperialism took place on the 21st of August. The Haitian Revolution began on this date in 1791. The blow that this slave uprising delivered to the French Empire cannot be overstated. Haiti was their most profitable colony, and the loss of Haiti led to France selling vast amounts of its New World territory to the USA, then a young country, in what's known as the Louisiana Purchase. Conversely, the year 1623 marks a significant turning point in French history that is defined by growing national influence rather than shrinking colonial influence. The 1623 Treaty of Paris, which limited Habsburg control over a strategic alpine region called the Valtelline Valley, set the stage for France's rise as a powerful European state. This watershed moment in France's diplomatic history heralded the emergence of an assertive, independent French foreign policy that was based on national interest rather than confessional ties. The passage of this treaty initiated French colonialism. By challenging their powerful southern neighbour in Europe, France was spurred on to challenge Spanish monopolistic control over the colonisation of the New World. Shortly after the treaty, Cardinal Richelieu established France's first centralised navy, and so began the French Empire.
Et ton ami Bob Montagnier?
Michel mentions a person called Bob Montagnier, whose last name is very similar to that of Michel de Montaigne, who was an early intellectual critic of European colonialism at the time of its inception. Montaigne believed that the emerging process of European colonisation was unjustifiable, hypocritical, ethically bankrupt, and motivated by materialistic greed. Montaigne challenged the notion of Europe's moral superiority, arguing that Europeans are the ones who are truly savage, evidenced by the massacres of indigenous peoples launched in the name of civilization. Bob Montagnier is mentioned to allude to Montaigne's anti-colonial perspective, and to introduce this perspective into a modern criticism of 20th century imperialism both in Paris and Washington. We can see that Godard, in his historical analysis, is dealing in terms of what his historian contemporaries at the Annales School defined as the longue durée. Fernand Braudel of the Annales School supposed that short-term events and cycles in history were underpinned by old attitudes of thought and action, resistant frameworks dying hard, at times against all logic.
To my ancestor Sir Bertram, gallant soldier, great lover, and the soul of chivalry. No doubt, Jeeves, you noticed the family resemblance.
Many times.
Yes, thank you.
Godard is applying this historiographical method to situate France's imperial decline in the face of growing American hegemony as part of a longer process of developing historical and intellectual trends over centuries. Finally, we have arrived at the first of the three elements that compose the contemporaneous geopolitical commentary that is offered in this scene.
Il y a Beyrouthi aussi.
Michel and Tolmachov discuss a person called Beyrouthi, whose name is pronounced in an identical manner to Beiruti, which is a demonym for something or someone that comes from the Lebanese city of Beirut. In 1958, the US invaded the city of Beirut for 3 months. This was known as Operation Bluebat, and it was the first exercising of the Eisenhower Doctrine. Lebanon had previously been a French mandate, and so the 1958 crisis in Lebanon represented direct American meddling in France's former colonial holding, which indicated France's decline in power on the world stage. Michel speaks on the phone, and the digits of the phone number mentioned connote moments of French imperial expansion and the triumph of French civilization on the one hand, and, on the other hand, the numbers paradoxically connote French division and hypocrisy. Bob Montagnier's number is Élysée 9984. In 1884, France fought the Sino-French War against China to consolidate its position as the dominant colonial power in Indochina. This French victory was defined by the technological supremacy of modern European armies and navies, which added to the narrative value of the conflict in terms of fueling chauvinistic boastfulness. Additionally, the Berlin Conference that divided Africa between European powers took place in 1884. France was a major beneficiary. This meeting to partition Africa in the absence of a single representative from the continent was the ultimate expression of European chauvinism, colonial arrogance, and the hypocrisy of the civilizing mission. However, while France was subjugating the non-European peoples of the world, in that same year, the Statue of Liberty was gifted to America in order to celebrate the abolition of slavery and the overthrow of British rule. The hypocrisy of France in its colonial era is also alluded to by the number 99. As part of the broader Dreyfus affair, the second trial of Captain Alfred Dreyfus took place in 1899, which shook the bedrock of French society and challenged a number of the purported values of the post-revolutionary French Republic. The Dreyfus affair surrounded the false treason charge given to a French army captain of Jewish descent on a baseless accusation of selling secrets to the Germans. In 1894, Alfred Dreyfus was convicted in a secret military trial, stripped of his rank, and given a life sentence on Devil's Island in Guyana. In 1899, Dreyfus was retried and found guilty again. The Dreyfus affair, the anti-Semitism motivating it, and the cover-up surrounding it exposed the hypocrisy of the French Republic. In contrast to the founding revolutionary ideas of the nation, France's institutions proved themselves to be prejudiced, corrupt, and untransparent. The Dreyfus affair shattered the reputation of the French military, which was overhauled in the aftermath of the scandal and purged of its most blimpish officers. This process further agitated the conservative crowd that had been calling for Dreyfus's death. From the perspective of a traditionalist, imperialist Frenchman, the effects of the Dreyfus affair were disastrous. This sentiment was so potent and long-lasting in some portions of French society that it fueled support for the Vichy government decades later. Collaboration with the Nazis was seen by many at the time as revenge for Dreyfus's alleged betrayal, which was seen as part of a wider Jewish plot.
Est-ce que je pourrais parler à Antonio? Ah bon? Non, non.
Michel asks for Beiruti on the phone and uses his first name, Antonio. Antonio is a Shakespearean character from The Tempest, noted for his shrewd Machiavellian outlook and his lack of repentance. Godard often references Shakespeare. He has a film called King Lear. In the coded narrative of this scene, the character Antonio from The Tempest, who usurped his brother Prospero, is referenced in order to draw a connection between America's post-war domination of France, plus America's usurping of French colonial power in the world, and the machinations of the ambitious and calculating Antonio. Antonio's perspective about power and leadership is selfish and transactional, viewing authority as a prize for those with the nimble spirits to obtain it, rather than seeing it as a duty or a right. Antonio perceives morality as a weakness. He is totally cynical, ruthless, and power-hungry. Even when shipwrecked, Antonio plots to advance his own ambitions among those stranded on the island. If America is Antonio, France would be King Alonso in the comparison. Alonso, consumed by grief for his role in the coup to oust Prospero, exhibits the internal conflict that arises from having stated values that one contradicts in pursuit of ambition. This characterization is emblematic of France's colonial hypocrisy. Additionally, like America in the satire that Godard is presenting, Antonio manipulates the imagination of others in order to advance his own power. Antonio convinces Sebastian to commit fratricide against Alonso by conjuring up images of a crown on Sebastian's head within the younger brother's imagination. We can speculate that Godard is associating Hollywood film with Antonio's rhetoric in the sense that both conjure up thoughts in the imagination in order to advance their power and pit people against each other. Or perhaps Godard is comparing post-war France to Antonio. Antonio offered his ill-gotten dukedom to be incorporated into Alonso's kingdom in a similar way to how France offered itself and its empire up to become incorporated into America's sphere of influence. Two detectives, who appear to have stepped out of an American B-movie, enter the travel agency looking for Michel almost immediately after he has departed. We learn that the agency's name is Inter-Americana. The inspectors confront Tolmachov next to a display piece that is advertising travel on an Israeli passenger liner called the SS Theodor Herzl. Although America would eventually replace France as Israel's main backer and military supplier, this transition had not really taken place yet. This would happen in 1967 when de Gaulle imposed an arms embargo on the region. This display, based on the wider series of references made, is most likely signalling towards the Suez Crisis in 1956, when, alongside Britain, France and Israel launched an invasion of Egypt in response to Nasser's nationalisation of the Suez Canal. American President Eisenhower applied diplomatic pressure to successfully force a withdrawal which humiliated the formerly powerful colonial nations and established America as the region's undisputed superpower. Michel's height is stated by the inspectors as part of his description. He is 1 metre and 79 centimetres tall. In 1879, President MacMahon resigned as French leader, which led to a restructuring of the constitution, preventing a strong executive branch from emerging in France's Third Republic. Critics of these changes argued that they weakened France by preventing the emergence of a singular strong ruler, in favour of the corruption, instability, and colonial mismanagement of ministerial rule. Shortly after the travel agent scene, another moment takes place that symbolises America's rising influence in France's former Arab colonies. A French soldier asks Michel for a match to light his cigarette, and Michel tells him to go away. During this moment, Jean Seberg's character, an American, prominently displays a packet of Camel cigarettes. The humiliation of a French soldier is paired with a visual reference to the Arab world. After analysing these connotative elements of this scene's dialogue and mise-en-scène, we can see that the cultural Americanization of French identity that is satirised directly in the film is being associated more indirectly with the replacement of the French Empire in the Arab world by the rising superpower of America. Not only this, but French colonial history is also being commented on in an immensely subtle and complex subtextual narrative that demonstrates Godard's mastery of cinema.